a woman's life than being betrayed by her own husband and her entire in-law family. The very people for whom I sacrificed everything, tossing me aside without an ounce of pity, like an object that had lost its value. Just as we stepped out of the courthouse, where I had tearfully agreed to walk away empty-handed, my sister-in-law blocked the entrance to the house and screamed in my face, "Didn't you hear you're banned from stepping foot in my house? Get out!" My husband and mother-in-law stood behind her, smirking with satisfaction. But little did they know that in that very moment, I would be the one having the last laugh. I looked dead into my sister-in-law's eyes and said, "I sold this house. And as for your position as director, I signed your termination papers this morning." The tires of the Mercedes glided smoothly over the immaculate asphalt of the exclusive gated community in Los Angeles. So silently they barely made a whisper. But inside my chest, a devastating storm was raging. Sitting in the passenger seat, I turned my face toward the window, where the vibrant bougainvilleas burst with color under the golden Southern California sun. Everything was so beautiful, so peaceful. But why was my heart shattered into a million pieces? Beside me, Jason, the man who until a few hours ago was legally my husband, hummed a tune. He was happy, a shameless joy built upon my absolute ruin. He had just won a grand game of chess. He was keeping all the assets he considered his, while simultaneously getting rid of me. The docile wife from a modest background, no longer worthy of his status as a CEO, was being discarded. He was thinking of a bright future with his young, beautiful mistress, who was carrying the heir to his bloodline, with his career at its absolute peak. He had no idea that everything he owned, everything he dreamed of, was about to vanish in a matter of minutes. The car stopped in front of the wrought iron gates of a 3-story Mediterranean-style estate, the house where I had invested all my heart and my talent as a financial investor, curating every corner to turn an empty lot into a masterpiece. This place had been my home, my pride, the nest I had built with all my love and sacrifice. But now, before my eyes, it was nothing more than the grand stage for the final act of this farce. Jason got out of the car without the slightest courtesy of opening the door for me, as he used to do. He walked straight to the entrance with the air of a lord returning to his domain. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the knot of bitterness tightening in my chest. "Stay strong, Isabella," I told myself. "The play is almost over. You can't break down now." I opened the door, grabbed my small designer purse, and followed him in silence. But just as I reached the threshold, a figure lunged at me, spreading her arms to block my path like a territorial hen. It was Sophia, my dearest sister-in-law. Wearing a tight, designer dress and flawless makeup, she crossed her arms, looking at me with the smugness of a victor observing a pathetic loser. "Where do you think you're going, ex-sister-in-law?" Her high-pitched, contemptuous voice echoed in the quiet courtyard. "Are you deaf, or did you not hear the judge? You're not part of this family anymore. You are banned from stepping foot in my house." "Your house?" I smiled ironically, a rhetorical question dripping with sarcasm. "Yes, my house," she snapped arrogantly, lifting her chin. "And my entire family's. This place doesn't welcome useless parasites like you. Grab your things and get out of my sight." She pointed to a corner of the manicured lawn where my suitcase lay. The suitcase containing my 10 years of marriage, tossed there without a second thought. The lock had popped open, and my clothes, my books, and my few keepsakes were scattered across the green grass. An indescribable humiliation. At that moment, my mother-in-law, Patricia, and Jason walked out of the house. They made no attempt to intervene. They simply stood there with their arms crossed and a satisfied smirk, as if enjoying a theatrical play directed by their own daughter. They wanted to see me broken, begging. "She's right, Isabella," Patricia said with a sickeningly sweet voice, though every word was laced with venom. "There are daughters-in-law, and then there are daughters-in-law, and you simply don't fit our family's caliber anymore. Here, take this little bit of cash." She pulled a rather thin stack of $100 bills from her crocodile skin handbag and tossed it onto the ground, right at my feet. "Consider this a final act of charity. Take the money and leave. Don't disturb my son's new life anymore." "Isabella," Jason chimed in, looking at me without an ounce of remorse, only the cruel coldness of someone who had achieved his goal. "It's over. Don't cling to this. You'll only humiliate yourself further. Your place isn't here anymore. Accept it. 7 years. 7 years playing the role of the devoted, exemplary wife. 7 years allowing his entire family to go from a modest, working class life in the Midwest, to sheer opulence in California. Living in this estate, driving luxury SUVs, wearing designer labels, and this was what I got in return: abandonment, humiliation, and crumbs thrown to the ground as if I were a beggar. My blood boiled, but suddenly, I started to laugh. A soft laugh, but one that rang clear and defiant in the tense air. A sound completely off the script they had prepared. My laughter left the three of them paralyzed, their victorious faces twisted into bizarre confusion. "What are you laughing at?" Jason frowned. "Have you lost your mind?" I didn't answer him. Slowly, I wiped away the tear that threatened to fall. I lifted my head and looked them in the eyes, one by one. My gaze was no longer filled with pain or fear. It was cold, sharp, and filled with profound pity. I looked at Sophia, the arrogant sister-in-law. "Your house. Are you sure?" Then, with a strangely calm voice, whose words dropped like a judge's gavel, I said, "I feel sorry for you, Sophia. I sold this house." "What? What?" Sophia stammered, the smile freezing on her lips. "You're lying. What right do you have to sell my brother's house?" She let out a forced laugh, as if she had just heard the most ridiculous joke in the world. "Who do you think you are to threaten me? What power do you think you have in the company? Just so you know, I am the director of marketing, my brother's right hand. You're just a kept housewife." I didn't let her finish. I raised a hand to cut her off. "Director of marketing?" I smirked. "Well, I have some more bad news for you. As for that position of yours, I signed your termination papers this morning too." This time, not only Sophia but also Jason and Patricia stood petrified. They looked at me as if I were insane, as if I were hallucinating. "What the hell are you talking about?" Jason roared. "By what authority do you fire my sister?" I flashed an enigmatic smile. "You ask by what authority?" "All right." I calmly took my iPhone out of my purse, scrolled through my contacts, and stopped on the name Sam, assistant. I hit call and put it on speaker. "Yes, Madam Chairwoman. Do you have any instructions for me?" A middle-aged, highly respectful, and strictly professional male voice sounded through the speaker. "Madam Chairwoman." The three of them looked at each other again, bewildered. A dark premonition, an absolute confusion, began to take hold of their minds. I ignored them and continued giving orders. My voice was no longer that of a housewife, but of a supreme executive holding the power of life and death. "Sam, I need you to handle two matters immediately. First, the estate on Oakwood Lane. Number 12. I sold it to Mr. Reynolds last week. The closing paperwork is signed and the deed is transferred. Please call his attorney and tell him to send his people to initiate the property takeover immediately." "What? You actually sold the house?" The three of them screamed in unison, their voices laced with panic. "You're lying. You couldn't have." "And second," I continued, my voice ice cold, ignoring their screams, "send the official board of directors resolution to Miss Sophia Brooks. Her termination from the position of marketing director is effective as of today. Grounds: gross incompetence and violation of the professional code of ethics. Oh, and first thing tomorrow morning, I want a detailed forensic audit report on the financial status of the subsidiary managed by the former CEO, Jason Brooks." I hung up and turned to look at their three faces, pale as corpses, still trapped in a state of sheer disbelief. "I accepted the divorce," I said with a glacial smile on my lips. "But perhaps you should prepare yourselves to leave my house, and also my company, don't you think?" The curtain had fallen, and their nightmare had only just begun. If you're curious to know who Isabella really is, why she holds such absolute power, and what fate awaits her cheating husband's family after this cold sentence, hit us to not miss the next installments of this thrilling story. Your support is our greatest motivation. Until next time, the expansive courtyard of the estate sank into a suffocating silence, broken only by the rustle of the wind through the palm trees. The three people who, just moments ago, were overflowing with arrogance, now stood as still as stone statues, their faces morphed from shock and confusion to absolute terror. The title of chairwoman and the termination orders, issued with undeniable authority, had struck a lethal blow that shattered their pride and their delusions of grandeur. They looked at me no longer with the disdain of superiors, but with a maddening doubt, a vague fear of a force they couldn't comprehend. What? What did you just say? Jason was the first to stammer, his voice trembling, completely stripped of his CEO composure. Who did you call? Madam Chairwoman? What kind of sick joke are you playing? Isabella? He pronounced my real name, a name I hadn't used in a long time. Perhaps in his panic, he had invoked it unconsciously in a last-ditch effort to cling to something familiar, a tiny shred of control. A joke? I let out a bitter laugh. Who has been acting for 7 years? Me or you? You all played the role of a distinguished high society family so well that you fooled yourselves, forgetting who provided the stage and the script in the first place. I didn't want to argue anymore. I simply picked up my purse, walked right past them, and went inside the house. From this moment on, this house was truly mine. I walked to the living room sofa where I had once endured their insults, and I calmly sat down. I crossed my legs, leaned back, and adopted the posture of the true owner, waiting for security to deal with the trespassers. I watched the three of them, still standing stunned in the doorway, and a profound sadness washed over me. I once loved, I once believed, I once yearned with all my heart for a complete family, only to face this harsh, painful reality. The memories of the past years flooded back, not the sweet ones, but the memories of the decision that led me to this turning point. I was not the poor, complacent Midwestern girl they thought I was. I am Isabella Vance, the only daughter and sole heiress of one of the most legendary Wall Street investors in the United States. My father, before passing away, left me not only a colossal fortune but also a mind trained to see through numbers, corporate conspiracies, and human hearts. But that same wealth and intelligence became a burden. From a young age, I was always surrounded by suitors, elegant and talented men, but in their eyes, I always read the same thing: greed. They didn't want me. They wanted the empire behind me. I was exhausted, sick of that high society world full of fake smiles and calculated moves. I craved something simple, a love born from the alignment of two souls. A man who would love me for being myself, even if I wasn't a corporate magnate. And so, I made a decision that many considered insane. I decided to hide my identity. I created a new persona, Anna Davis, a girl from a regular, middle-class family, graduated from a decent state university, working an administrative desk job. I wanted to test the waters. I wanted to see if, when I was no longer Isabella Vance, when I was just a normal girl living paycheck to paycheck, I could find true love. I met Jason at a business seminar in Chicago. He was a sales manager for a mid-sized firm back then. He was handsome, eloquent, and exuded an overwhelming confidence and ambition. He noticed me because of the sharp questions I asked one of the keynote speakers. He managed to introduce himself, and we started talking. He didn't ask where I worked or what my family background was. He only talked about his ambitions, his dreams. He said he wanted to build his own empire, to prove his worth to the world. He claimed he despised nepotism and trust fund kids. He perfectly played the role of a self-made man with immense drive and zero materialistic shallowness. I was drawn to that image. I thought this was the man I had been looking for, someone with my same aspirations, who wouldn't be intimidated by a smart, strong woman. Our love blossomed from mutual admiration and connection. I loved him sincerely, without any hidden agendas. I decided I would help him build his empire, and I would be the one supporting him from the shadows. But perhaps I was wrong from the very beginning. Perhaps that love I thought was sincere was just part of a much larger play, as a play he directed from the moment he met me. Did he know who I was all along? After a passionate courtship, I decided to marry Jason. I believed he was the missing puzzle piece, the life partner I could walk with until the end. I didn't know that this decision was the first step into a diabolically sophisticated trap. Before the wedding, I did something I considered a proof of absolute love and trust. I wanted to help Jason achieve his dream of owning his own business. I told him I had some small savings, a modest inheritance from my parents, and that I wanted to invest it in him. At first, Jason refused with great dignity. No, I can't accept your money. I'm a man. I have to make it on my own. He played his role of the honorable provider flawlessly. But I, blinded by love, felt even more admiration and desire to help him. I had to insist relentlessly. I told him it wasn't a gift. It was an investment in his talent, that I believed in him. We'll be husband and wife soon. Your success will be my success. Finally, after several refusals, he reluctantly accepted. And so, Creative Apex LLC was born, a marketing and PR firm, the field Jason excelled in. My name appeared on zero public documents. I was the ultimate silent partner. All the capital, from incorporation costs and office leases in downtown LA to the first few months of payroll, came from me. But on paper, the sole founder and owner was Jason Brooks. I handed him a kingdom with my bare hands. After we got married, I didn't stop there. I decided to fade into the background, playing the role of the traditional housewife, so I could fully support my husband's career. But my support wasn't limited to hot dinners and words of encouragement. I used my most powerful weapon, the mind of a financial genius, and a vast network of contacts inherited from my father. I became the shadow strategist, the true CEO of Creative Apex. Every business strategy, every major marketing pitch Jason made came from my advisement and direction. He was the executor, the charismatic face presenting ideas to clients. But the one paving the road was me. I used my shell investment funds companies no one knew belonged to me to funnel opportunities his way. I suggested to major corporate partners in my network that they prioritize contracts with my husband's firm. Multi-million-dollar contracts and massive projects fell one after another into the hands of Creative Apex. Jason's company went from a small startup to one of the most prestigious agencies in California in just a few years. Jason went from a simple sales manager to a young, hotshot CEO, a model of success admired by everyone. The glare of success blinded him entirely. He started to believe that everything he had achieved was the fruit of his own extraordinary genius. He forgot who had orchestrated those windfalls. He forgot who had spent sleepless nights designing the strategies that led him to victory. He took my sacrifices for granted. He transformed me from his partner and equal into a blurry shadow standing behind him. I didn't notice it immediately. I was too happy, too proud of my husband's success. I thought his success was my happiness. I didn't realize that the beast of ambition I had fed now had wings to fly, and was beginning to look at me differently, with the eyes of someone who wanted to seize it all, and not just him. His entire family, whom I had welcomed with open arms, began to sharpen their claws, turning into a plague of greedy parasites ready to suck my blood dry. When the empire I had secretly built for Jason stabilized, he decided to bring his entire family from their small Ohio town to Los Angeles. He told me he wanted to give back to his parents, that his mother and sister deserved a better life. As a good wife, of course, I didn't object. On the contrary, I supported it wholeheartedly. With my own money, I bought them a luxury condo in Century City. I furnished it completely. They wanted for nothing. I thought it was the right thing to do to reunite the family so Jason could focus on work without worry. I never imagined I wasn't welcoming loved ones, but inviting a swarm of locusts into my life. At first, they seemed immensely grateful. Patricia, my mother-in-law, came over every day, thanking me endlessly. "Oh, Anna, thanks to you, the whole family's life has changed. I don't know how to thank you." Sophia, my sister-in-law, was also very warm, always sweetly calling me sis. But that mask of gratitude didn't last long. As they grew accustomed to the luxury lifestyle, having everything handed to them, their greedy and selfish nature began to show openly. They stopped seeing my actions as a favor and started considering them an obligation. They assumed my assets were theirs by right. Patricia started making absurd demands. "Anna, that Hermes bag you're carrying is gorgeous. Buy me one just like it. After all, I'm the mother of the CEO. I have an image to maintain. That pearl necklace is nice, but the color washes me out. Buy me a diamond one." Sophia was even worse. She treated me like a walking ATM. "Sis, let me use your Amex to go shopping on Rodeo Drive with my friends." "Anna, are you using your Range Rover today? Let me borrow it to pick up my boyfriend." Mine is too basic. I'm embarrassed. They demanded things with astonishing entitlement, as if it were their birthright. If I refused, they took instant offense, insinuating I was cheap, that despite having money I had no class, and that I looked down on my husband's family. But the financial drain wasn't the worst part. The psychological attacks hurt the most. As Jason's position solidified, they began to feel that I, a mere housewife, was a discordant note, a stain on their prestigious family. They began to openly disrespect me and try to tear me down. Anna, Patricia said during a family brunch, you should take some etiquette or country club tennis lessons. If you just stay home all day, people will say my son married a Midwestern hillbilly who doesn't know how to socialize. It's true, Sophia added. All my friends ask me why the wife of the CEO of Creative Apex dresses so plainly. You need to take care of yourself. Learn how to dress and do your makeup to be worthy of my brother. And Jason, the husband I loved so much, didn't say a single word to defend me. His silence was an endorsement. He even joined in. Honey, my mom and sister have a point. You should elevate your look a bit. I like to show off my wife when we go to industry galas. He had completely forgotten who gave him that status. He forgot that without me, he'd still be pitching low-level ad buys in Ohio. Together, they turned me into a stranger, an intruder in the very world I had built. They enjoyed my money while trampling on my self-esteem. They were a plague of parasites that not only sucked the blood but injected venom into the host that fed them. I suffered deeply. I felt profoundly disappointed. There were moments when I wanted to reveal everything, kick them all out of my life, but I couldn't. My love for Jason, though wounded, was still there. And I still harbored a sliver of hope, the hope that one day he would realize his mistake, realize who truly loved and sacrificed for him. I didn't know my hope was an illusion. Because while I was trying to save a rotting marriage, he was already somewhere else, building a new nest. While I faced this plague of parasites alone in my own home, Jason, the husband I was still trying to hold on to, was busy building another paradise, a paradise built on my money and his lies. The final straw, the event that shattered my last illusions about that man, happened on a day with torrential rain. It was the anniversary of my father's death. Like every year, I drove alone to the old family estate outside the city where the private mausoleum is located, to bring flowers to my parents. I had reminded Jason a week in advance, and he had promised to clear his schedule to come with me. But at the last minute, he called saying he had an urgent Zoom meeting with overseas investors that he couldn't cancel. His voice on the phone sounded full of regret and apologies. Though sad, I believed him. I drove alone in the rain. But perhaps fate wanted me to see his true face. On my way back, waiting at a red light at a major intersection in Beverly Hills, I witnessed an unforgettable scene. Jason's white Audi Q7 was parked across the street, right in front of an exclusive luxury baby boutique. And he wasn't the only one who got out. With utmost care, he opened the door and shielded a young woman with an umbrella. She was wearing a loose maternity dress, but it couldn't hide a rather prominent baby bump. He wrapped his arm tenderly around her waist, and they walked into the store together. My world collapsed at that intersection. The honking of cars around me seemed to fade into a vacuum. My ears rang, my eyes filled with tears. Urgent meeting, overseas investors, all brazen lies. He wasn't in a meeting. He was shopping for his unborn child with another woman. I don't know how long I sat paralyzed there. Only when the aggressive honking from the cars behind me snapped me out of it did I react. My hands shook. I felt a freezing chill. I didn't drive home. I made a U-turn and followed him. I had to know who this woman was. I had to know how deep his deception went. I parked discreetly down the block and watched in silence. An hour later, they came out loaded with shopping bags. They looked as happy as a married couple about to welcome their first child. He got behind the wheel, and I followed them again. The car didn't head to his office or our house. It headed to a luxury high-rise apartment complex in West Hollywood. He parked, and they both walked into the elegant building. I didn't follow them in. I stayed in my car, staring up at the lit windows with a broken heart. He had another home, another family, and I, his legal wife, had been reduced to an extra, an idiot who knew nothing. I didn't go home that night. I booked a hotel room and sat alone in the dark, trying to piece my life back together. I cried. I cried for my stupidity, for my wasted love, for 10 years of my youth mercilessly trampled on. By the next morning, I wasn't crying anymore. The pain had morphed into a glacial hatred. I called my assistant, Sam. Sam, I need a background check on a woman and an address. I gave him her license plate and the apartment address. Within hours, I had the results. Her name was Emily. She was the personal secretary Jason had hired just over a year ago. A young, pretty, ambitious girl. The West Hollywood apartment was leased under Jason's name, and the baby she was expecting, according to what she bragged about to her friends, belonged to the CEO. Everything was clear. He wasn't just cheating, he was starting a new family. He had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. My love, my sacrifice, my patience, all of it had become a macabre joke. I realized it was time for the farce of my submission to end. I had no reason to cling to a dead marriage, but I wouldn't leave quietly. I wouldn't allow him and his family to gloat and live happily at the expense of my suffering. If this was hell, we were all going to burn together. A new revenge plan, infinitely more cruel and decisive, began to take shape in my mind. The truth about Jason's child was the final dagger that severed any emotional tie, any weak hope I had left. I no longer felt the pain of a betrayed wife, but the cold hatred of a grandmaster in a chess match, someone who had been cheated and was determined to flip the board at any cost. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. I went to my best friend, my only trusted ally at that moment, my personal attorney, Arthur Sterling, a middle-aged shark of a lawyer who had worked with my father since the early days, and who knew better than anyone the legal labyrinth of the financial empire I was hiding. I told him everything: my hidden identity, the sham of a marriage, the proof of infidelity, and the machinations of Jason's family. Arthur, after listening in silence, didn't look surprised. He just sighed tiredly. I warned you from the beginning, Isabella. The human heart is the most unpredictable asset. But well, at this point, regrets are useless. Now, we execute. What are we going to do? I asked, my voice deadly calm. They want your wealth. They want to leave you on the street with nothing. Arthur smiled cunningly. We'll give them exactly what they want, but on our terms. And so we drafted a counterattack. A legal trap of exquisite sophistication. The plan was called the Perfect Delivery, and it consisted of 2 steps targeting the 2 largest assets Jason's family coveted: the estate and creative apex. The first trap was the house. Arthur analyzed it. Even though you paid for everything, the land and the construction legally, the property is a marital asset in California. If you divorce, you'll have to split it. We can't allow that. The plan was to convince Jason to transfer the property into a new legal entity, an irrevocable family trust and holding company, a complex financial tool I knew someone with Jason's limited real-world financial literacy wouldn't fully grasp. I went back home and put on the performance of a lifetime. I spoke to Jason with an expression of deep concern. Honey, I keep reading the economy is taking a turn. Agencies are going under, and CEOs are being held personally liable. I'm so worried. Your company is growing, but so are your risks. If a lawsuit happens, our home, the fruit of your hard work, could be seized. My logical words, appealing perfectly to the fears of a man who didn't always play by the rules in business, rattled him. So what should we do? I have an idea, I said. A lawyer friend advised me to set up a holding trust. We transfer the deed of the house to that trust, which acts as an independent legal entity protected by corporate veil laws. That way, whatever happens with the agency, no one can touch our home. It will be safe for our future children. Jason was completely sold on the idea of bulletproofing his assets. He didn't know that in the bylaws of that trust, drafted meticulously by Arthur, there was a hidden, ironclad clause: the sole managing trustee, with absolute, unchallengeable power to liquidate or sell all assets within the trust, was its founder, Isabella Vance. He happily signed all the paperwork, unknowingly handing me total control of his most prized possession. The second trap was aimed at creative apex, the kill shot. I told Jason, you seem so stressed lately. You have no time for family. How about you transfer all your equity in the LLC to my name? I'll manage the legal and bureaucratic headaches as the silent owner, so you can just focus on being the face and the CEO. After all, the company belongs to both of us. This time he hesitated. The agency was his baby, his symbol of power. But I gave him an irrefutable business reason. Look, I have a clean slate and great credit. If the company is under my name, it will be much easier to secure that next round of venture capital and onboard new massive partners without your personal liabilities bogging us down, I added, with a loving tone. Plus, I want to share the burden. I don't want to just be the woman standing behind you. Greed and ego won again. He figured that even if the shares were in my name, he would remain the CEO. the one wielding the actual operational power. He didn't hesitate to sign the transfer of all equity. He didn't know that in that very second, he had officially become an at-will employee of his own wife. Both traps were perfectly set. I held all the legal chains to bind Jason. His house, his career, everything. Legally, he was a man with absolutely nothing. But he didn't know it. He kept gloating, dreaming of his new life with his mistress. He was counting down the days to kick me out of the house. He didn't know he was the one about to be thrown to the curb. Once I had the legal leverage to ruin Jason, I knew it was time to bring my play to its final act, but I wouldn't be the one to make the first move. I would let him, in his arrogance and ignorance, tear down the stage with his own hands. I started changing my attitude. I stopped being the docile, patient wife. I became jealous, controlling. I called him constantly to ask where he was, what he was doing. I complained when he came home late. I showed obvious disgust whenever he mentioned his secretary, Emily. I played the part of a wife on the edge of a nervous breakdown, a paranoid, exhausting woman. My attitude was the perfect excuse Jason had been looking for. He didn't have to invent reasons to argue anymore. I was handing them to him on a silver platter. Fights at home became a daily routine. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law, naturally, always took his side. "Control your wife, son," Patricia would yell. "She's unbearable. On top of being a freeloader, she forgets her place." "It's true, bro," Sophia would add. "Your wife acts like a psycho. If you don't put her in her place, she's going to ruin your life." Together, they built the pressure cooker that boxed me into the role of the terrible, irredeemable wife. And then, the day I had been waiting for finally arrived. Jason threw a signed divorce petition onto the kitchen island. There was no trace of fake guilt, only cruel determination. "I can't stand you anymore, Anna. We're getting a divorce," he said, his voice like ice. "I'm sick of your jealousy and your controlling behavior. This marriage is hell." I didn't scream. I didn't beg, like he expected. I just sat there, letting tears stream down my cheeks. I played the shocked, deeply wounded woman who finally accepts defeat. "Have you made up your mind?" I asked, my voice cracking. "It's done," he replied without hesitation, quickly pivoting to the main issue, the assets. "You know I built this company from the ground up. This house, the cars, everything belongs to the LLC or me. You've lived like a queen here for years. That ends now. I won't leave you totally homeless. I'll give you a small alimony payout for the years you wasted. We'll go to court and get this done quickly." I didn't fight back. I nodded, to the sheer shock of his entire family. They couldn't believe I was agreeing to walk away with virtually nothing so easily. They had braced for a vicious legal battle. My surrender made them even more arrogant, utterly convinced I was a stupid, legally illiterate housewife. On the day of the divorce hearing, I delivered my final performance flawlessly. I wore simple clothes, my face drawn, my eyes swollen from crying. I sat at the petitioner's table trembling, looking pathetic. On the other side, Jason, Sophia, and Patricia wore their Sunday best, their faces failing to hide their triumph. They weren't at a divorce hearing, they were at a coronation. In the courtroom, Jason's high-priced LA lawyer delivered his arguments eloquently. He presented proof that Creative Apex was Jason's separate property, founded before the marriage really took off. He argued that the estate and cars were shielded assets. He claimed that during the marriage, I had contributed nothing financially, was merely a stay-at-home wife, and therefore deserved nothing beyond a token settlement. I didn't rebut. Arthur, acting as my seemingly out-of-his-depth lawyer, offered weak objections and quickly folded. I cried. I begged the judge for a little compassion, a little more money to start over. But, of course, faced with the irrefutable documents from opposing counsel, my pleas were denied. The hearing ended with a flawless victory for Jason. He kept everything. I walked away empty-handed. As the judge struck the gavel, I saw the victorious smirks on the lips of Jason, Sophia, and Patricia. They looked at me with the superiority reserved for pathetic losers. They didn't know that this very verdict, this very arrogance, was the final, inescapable trap I had set, and they had walked right into it without a shred of suspicion. The sound of the gavel was still echoing in my mind. A dry crack, but to Jason's family, it sounded like a symphony of victory. They strutted out of the courthouse with the swagger of royals who had just conquered a nation. Patricia and Sophia flanked Jason, laughing and chatting animatedly. They didn't even spare a glance for me, the discarded ex-wife walking alone behind them. They were too busy planning the celebration dinner at Nobu for that night, discussing how they would redecorate the estate, and dreaming of the bright future awaiting them when Jason officially moved his mistress in. They were entirely consumed by the illusion of total victory. They didn't know that the second they crossed the courthouse doors, a legal and financial hurricane had been unleashed. A hurricane that would obliterate their euphoria and their delusions. My performance in court was over. Their real-life tragedy had just begun. Back at the estate, I did nothing. I sat quietly, made myself a cup of Earl Grey tea, and waited. I knew I wouldn't have to wait long, and I didn't. About an hour later, before I had even finished my tea, a piercing scream echoed from Sophia's home office on the second floor. Ah! Oh my God, what is this? Sophia came running out of her room, her face pale as a ghost, clutching her phone with shaking hands. She tripped down the stairs in a blind panic. Mom! Jason! Something happened. Patricia and Jason were in the living room, happily watching a reality real estate show. They jumped at Sophia's scream. What's wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost, Patricia scolded. My email, Sophia stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. She shoved the phone at her brother. Jason frowned, took the phone, and all the color drained from his face too. On the screen was an official email from the HR department of Vance Holdings, a massive conglomerate they only knew as Creative Apex's biggest, most vital corporate partner. The subject line in glaring red read, Urgent. Notice of termination. The content was brief and glacial. Based on the findings of an internal corporate investigation, the board of directors has elected to terminate the employment contract of Miss Laszlo, Sophia Brooks, Director of Marketing, effective immediately. Grounds for termination: gross incompetence, failure to meet fiduciary duties, and severe violations of corporate ethics negatively impacting the reputation of Vance Holdings and its subsidiaries. Termination? Patricia gasped. Why? What did Sophia do? Jason, you're the CEO. You have to fix this. Jason was just as confused and furious. None of this made sense. How could Vance Holdings, a client and partner, directly fire an executive at his firm without consulting him? I'm going to call and clear this up. He pulled out his phone and furiously dialed the VP of Vance Holdings, a man he usually referred to as his golf buddy. The phone rang out to voicemail. He tried the HR director. This time someone answered, but only to tell him in a cold, distant tone, Mr. Brooks, this is a direct mandate from the chairwoman. We are merely executing it. If you have any grievances, direct them to the office of the board of directors, the chairwoman, the mysterious, untouchable head of the conglomerate, whom no one at the agency had ever met. Why would she issue such an order? While the family spiraled into their first wave of panic, another nightmare knocked on the front door. The doorbell rang. The housekeeper opened it, and standing there was no ordinary guest. It was a man in a sharp, dark suit, flanked by two highly professional, intimidating men. Good afternoon, the man said in a polite but emotionless voice. I am Arthur Sterling, legal counsel representing the new owner of this estate. I am here to inform you that, pursuant to the executed escrow and title transfer documents, you have exactly 24 hours to collect your personal belongings and vacate the premises for my client. What? Sold the house? The three of them shrieked in horror. Who sold the house? This is our house, Patricia screamed. Arthur Sterling simply placed a thick manila folder on the coffee table. Please review the documents. This is a certified copy of the deed transfer and sale agreement, bearing the signature of the managing trustee and seller, Miss Isabella Vance, and my client, the buyer. All legal contingencies have been cleared. Jason lunged at the folder and ripped it open with shaking hands. He couldn't believe his eyes. My name, my signature, and the corporate seal of the family trust he had happily signed away months ago. He had been played. He had sold his own multi-million-dollar mansion without even knowing it. Anna! You bitch! He roared, spinning around to find me. But I was no longer sitting on the couch. I had quietly walked up to the second-floor landing. From the balcony, I looked down at the chaotic scene below and smiled. The panic inside the house reached its boiling point. The news of the firing and the eviction, hitting simultaneously, was like two buckets of ice water thrown over their arrogance. They completely lost whatever composure they had left. Impossible! This is fraud! Patricia kept screaming, pointing a trembling finger at Arthur Sterling. You're all scam artists! You colluded with that whore Anna to steal our house. I'm suing all of you. The lawyer remained entirely unfazed. He was used to dealing with tantrums. Ma'am, if you have a legal dispute, you are welcome to file a motion in civil court. Right now, I suggest you cooperate. If you are not off the premises in 24 hours, we will request the local sheriff's department to execute a forced eviction. Jason, recovering a shred of his calculating rationale, knew screaming was useless. He had to figure out who was pulling these massive strings. He started dialing frantically, one number after another. He called the members of the agency's board, guys he had wined and dined, bribed with Lakers courtside tickets and expensive dinners. He only got endless ringing or cold, evasive answers. Sorry, Jason. I'm in a meeting. I can't talk right now. Nobody wanted anything to do with him. He had become a sinking ship, and the smart rats had already jumped. Why? Why is this happening? He muttered to himself, pulling at his hair. He didn't understand. He had everything under control. I had lost miserably in court an hour ago. Who had the power to flip his entire life upside down in one afternoon? Who could make a whole board of directors ghost him? Who could buy a Beverly Hills estate in cash so quickly? He looked up at the balcony where I stood. His eyes were filled with venom and a creeping dread. He was finally starting to realize that his Midwestern housewife was playing a game he couldn't even fathom. Right at that moment of maximum tension, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom, exuding an otherworldly level of wealth, slowly rolled through the open gates and parked directly in front of the grand entrance. The door opened, and a middle-aged man in a bespoke Savile Row suit and sunglasses stepped out, followed by two massive private security guards. It was Miss Reynolds, the new owner of the estate and one of my late father's closest billionaire associates. He walked past Jason's family as if they were invisible. He looked up at me on the balcony, smiled warmly, and gave a slight nod. Then he turned to his lawyer. Arthur, where are we on the timeline? I don't have all day. I want possession today so my contractors can start gutting this dump. His words, though spoken calmly, were a violent slap across the faces of Jason's family. A dump. That's what he called the mansion they had flaunted like royalty. Mr. Reynolds, the previous occupants are refusing to vacate, Arthur replied. Mr. Reynolds frowned, clearly annoyed. Oh, really? Have security handle it. Throw them out. Toss their garbage on the curb. I'll hire a hazmat crew to clean up later. The order was absolute. The private security team immediately moved in. Folks, one of the guards said, built like a linebacker, move toward the exit, or we will physically remove you. How dare you touch me? Patricia shrieked, trying to claw at the guard, but he easily sidestepped and escorted her firmly by the arm. Jason and Sophia couldn't fight back against men twice their size. They were marched out of the front doors in the most humiliating way imaginable. Their prized possessions, Sophia's designer shoes, Jason's golf clubs, Patricia's flat-screen TVs, were unceremoniously stuffed into heavy black trash bags by Mr. Reynolds' crew and hurled onto the manicured sidewalk outside the gates. A literal pile of trash. The three of them stood on the curb, devastated, watching their home be occupied, their status symbols treated like garbage. They were tasting the exact medicine they had tried to force down my throat, but the nightmare wasn't over. A black luxury SUV pulled up to the curb, and my assistant, Sam, stepped out. He wasn't there to check on me. He was there to execute the rest of the sentence. His appearance, in his immaculate dark suit and impassive face, signaled the final act. He ignored the hysterical family on the curb and walked past the gates, looking up at me. I had just walked down the front steps. He bowed slightly with deep respect. Madam Chairwoman, all directives have been executed according to your orders. The words Madam Chairwoman echoed in the driveway again, but this time, not through a phone speaker. It was the final nail in the coffin, destroying the last shred of denial in Jason's family. They heard it all. Their faces transitioned from shock to absolute, paralyzing terror. A delayed, agonizing realization hit them. They finally understood. The naive Midwestern wife they had bullied and stepped on was the mysterious chairwoman of Vance Holdings, the ultimate puppet master who held absolute power over their company, their wealth, and their lives. The 7 years of marriage, Jason's meteoric rise, the luxury lifestyle of the whole family, it had all been a gift, a concession from the very person they despised most. And now that they had betrayed that grace, the gift was being ripped away without mercy. See? Chairwoman? Jason staggered toward the gate, his voice completely broken. He looked at me, stripped of all his arrogance and hatred, leaving only desperate pleading and a profound primal fear. Anna, is it you? Yes, I interrupted, my voice as cold as liquid nitrogen. I am Isabella Vance, the majority shareholder and silent founder of the venture fund that capitalized your entire agency. To make it simple for you, I am your boss. I am your sister's boss. And I own everything you think is yours. The naked, brutal truth forced him to his knees on the concrete, stripping away whatever dignity he had left. Isabella, please, I'm begging you. I know I screwed up. I'm a miserable piece of trash. A bastard. Forgive me. Forgive my family. Just this once, I'll do whatever you want. I'll leave Emily. We can start over. He grabbed the wrought iron gate, weeping hysterically. Patricia and Sophia ran over and fell to their knees beside him on the sidewalk. Isabella, sweetie, forgive me. I'm just a stupid old woman, Patricia sobbed. Sis, I'm sorry. I'm immature. I didn't mean it. Please forgive me, Sophia wailed. Their pathetic performance could no longer move my heart of stone. Forgiveness? I laughed bitterly. Did you think of that word when you humiliated me? When you tossed my bags on the lawn? When you conspired to leave me destitute? It's too late. I turned away from the gate. Sam? I looked at my assistant. Wrap it up. Sam nodded and signaled to the security guards. They stepped out of the gates and approached the kneeling family. Ladies and gentlemen, Sam said, professional but unyielding. Pursuant to the Corporate Asset Recovery Order, you must immediately surrender all property belonging to Vance Holdings and Creative Apex. That includes the keys to the company-leased Audi Q7, all corporate platinum credit cards, company cell phones, and laptops. The final stripping occurred in broad daylight on a Beverly Hills street. They confiscated Jason's designer wallet, pulling out every corporate card. They demanded he take off the Rolex I had bought him as a company bonus. They took Patricia's Hermes bag, which had been expensed to the company, and Sophia's iPhone Pro Max. Every single symbol of the wealth they had flaunted was ripped from their hands. They were stripped not just of their goods, but of their humanity. In the end, they were left with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a few wrinkled dollar bills. They looked like actual vagrants. Now, please vacate the perimeter. Sam delivered the final verdict. They didn't dare say another word. They slinked away, heads bowed, leaning on each other in their absolute misery. Where did they go? I didn't know, nor did I care. From that moment on, their lives had nothing to do with mine. I watched them walk away, their silhouettes hunched and broken, without feeling joy. I only felt a profound exhaustion and an immense emptiness. A war had ended, the curtain had dropped on the play, but the scars it left would take a long time to heal. Following their humiliating expulsion from the estate, the nightmare for Jason's family was only just beginning. Stripping them of their assets and titles was just step one, a punishment of material wealth and pride. But the damage they had done to the company, the illegal activities they had engaged in for years, couldn't go unpunished. This was no longer a personal vendetta. It was a matter of federal justice. I didn't just want them to experience loss. I wanted them to face the unforgiving wrath of the law. I wanted them to learn that no white-collar crime stays buried forever. I immediately convened an emergency meeting with my trusted legal and financial teams, spearheaded by Arthur and Sam. In the cold, glass-walled boardroom of Vance Holdings, I gave my final order in this war. I want a full forensic audit, I commanded, my voice firm and icy. Go through every ledger, every contract, every project at Creative Apex for the last 3 years since Jason was named CEO. I want to know where every single penny went. A team of the best financial analysts and forensic auditors worked around the clock. What they uncovered was far worse than I had imagined. Jason and his family weren't just incompetent parasites. They were a criminal enterprise. A greedy octopus that had wrapped its tentacles around the entire company, bleeding it dry systemically. The final report, hundreds of pages thick, detailed every fraud, every stream of dirty money, It made me sick. Jason, wielding the power I had handed him, had built a sprawling web of corporate corruption. He awarded massive PR contracts to shell companies owned by his frat buddies, inflating the cost to triple or quadruple their actual market value. The difference, of course, was kicked back to him in cash, luxury vacations, or offshore accounts. Sophia, as marketing director, approved million-dollar budgets for digital ad campaigns that never existed, hiring fake influencer agencies set up by her boyfriend to siphon funds. With that stolen money, they lived a faux billionaire lifestyle on Instagram, while lower-level agency employees struggled on entry-level salaries. Even Patricia, a housewife with zero business acumen, used her status as the CEO's mother to bully the HR and facilities departments into hiring her cousins from Ohio for corporate catering and landscaping services at exorbitant rates, delivering garbage quality. They had treated the company like a personal piggy bank, ripping off chunks of cash at every turn. The total damages amounted to nearly $10 million, a staggering figure that would have bankrupted any standalone agency if it weren't backed by Vance Holdings' deep pockets. Holding that report, I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt a profound disgust for their limitless greed. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had defrauded hundreds of hardworking employees and corporate shareholders. They deserved no mercy. I didn't sweep it under the rug internally. I decided to drag it all into the light. I called a press conference and published the findings of the internal investigation. I wanted to unmask them in the court of public opinion, not out of petty revenge, but to restore integrity and send a clear message to anyone who thought they could get rich by stealing from others. Immediately afterward, acting as the majority shareholder and primary victim, I authorized Arthur to hand over the entire dossier to the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, filing federal charges for wire fraud, embezzlement, and corporate malfeasance against Jason and his family. The long arm of the law, the ultimate checkmate, closed in on them, and this time, there would be no plea deals. The federal indictment, backed by an army of elite lawyers and bulletproof evidence, caused an absolute media earthquake in Los Angeles. The Creative Apex corruption scandal, due to its brazen nepotism and the sheer scale of the fraud, was fast-tracked by federal prosecutors. The trial became a public spectacle, exposing the rot of a family that thought they were untouchable. I chose to attend every day of the federal trial in downtown LA, not as a victim, but as the star witness for the prosecution. I wanted them to look me in the eye as they faced the consequences of their actions. On the day of my testimony, the courthouse steps were swarmed by reporters. I walked in with my head held high, wearing a tailored white pantsuit that radiated untouchable power. Inside, sitting at the defense table, Jason's family looked pathetic. Dressed in standard-issue federal jumpsuits, they were pale, gaunt, and destroyed. The prosecution presented a devastating case. Every piece of evidence, from fake invoices and bank records proving the kickbacks to recorded phone calls of their schemes, pulverized any attempt at a defense. The climax was my time on the stand, when Jason's public defender, attempting to provoke me, asked if this entire federal case was just a scorned woman's personal revenge for a messy divorce. I replied with absolute calm. "Counselor, yes, I suffered deeply from my ex-husband's betrayal. But my actions in this courtroom today are not about personal revenge. They are to seek justice for the hundreds of employees whose livelihoods were jeopardized, for the shareholders who were defrauded, and most importantly, to clean up the corporate environment and prove that absolutely no one is above the law." My words earned a silent nod of respect from the jury. My role had completely shifted. The trial wrapped up swiftly, and the downfall of Jason's family was absolute. The jury deliberated for less than a day. When the federal judge prepared to read the sentencing, the courtroom held its breath. The strike of his gavel was final and solemn, officially ending the Brooks family's farce and their freedom. The sentence was draconian. Jason, as the mastermind, was convicted on multiple counts of federal wire fraud and embezzlement. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of early parole. He was paying for his betrayal and greed with the rest of his prime years. Hearing the sentence, he collapsed into his chair, staring blankly at the wall. Sophia, as a key co-conspirator, received a 10-year federal sentence. Her glamorous future, ruined by sheer avarice and envy. As the marshals led her away in handcuffs, she shot me a look of burning, impotent hatred. The rest of their accomplices, including Sophia's boyfriend, received sentences ranging from 3 to 7 years. No one escaped. All their remaining illicit assets were seized by the government to pay restitution. They went all the way back to square one, but this time with empty hands, a federal record, and an unerasable stigma. Patricia, the only one who avoided prison time because her name wasn't explicitly on the fraudulent contracts, suffered a fate arguably worse. She watched her entire family be hauled off to federal penitentiaries. She collapsed sobbing in the courtroom gallery. Homeless, penniless, and entirely alone in California, she had to crawl back to the Midwest, relying on the charity of distant relatives she had previously alienated with her arrogance, forced to endure the mocking whispers of the very people she used to look down upon. As for Emily, Jason's mistress, upon realizing that her CEO baby daddy was going to federal prison for 2 decades and was completely bankrupt, she vanished without a trace, pawning whatever designer jewelry and bags he had bought her before the feds could seize them. Divine justice had caught up with all of them. They sowed the wind, and they reaped a hurricane that wiped out their money, their dignity, their freedom, and their future. I walked out of the federal courthouse into the bright California afternoon with a strange peace in my soul. All debts were paid. I no longer felt hatred, nor did I feel a triumphant high, just a profound serenity. A stormy, toxic chapter of my life had closed forever. I didn't let the victory make me complacent. Instead, it gave me a heavier sense of responsibility. I returned to the agency. Now purged of its rot, Creative Apex was rebranded and fully absorbed into Vance Enterprises. I stopped pushing for ruthless corporate expansion, and instead focused on building a company with a soul, where talent was rewarded and integrity was the ultimate metric. I threw myself into philanthropy, specifically establishing a venture fund designed to seed fund female entrepreneurs overcoming extreme adversity. I wanted to use my story and my capital to ensure that women had the financial independence to walk away from toxic situations. My life was incredibly busy, but filled with purpose. I no longer needed a man to lean on. I had become my own mountain. 5 years have passed since that trial. Time enough for the deep wounds to turn into faint scars, and for a new life to bloom. My life today is a vibrant canvas, peaceful, successful, and fiercely independent. Vance Enterprises is now an industry leader in sustainable green tech, education, and healthcare infrastructure. I proved you can build an empire without selling your soul. I no longer hide behind fake names. I am a highly visible, influential CEO, but I use my platform to lift up other women. The foundation I started has become a lifeline for hundreds of female founders nationwide. I had completely stopped looking for love. I learned to love myself first. But perhaps, when you finally stop desperately searching, happiness finds you on its own. During a business trip to Japan for a global summit on sustainable urban development, I met him. His name was Kenta, a brilliant Japanese architect with a gentle smile and a profound, grounding soul. We met by chance in a quiet Zen garden in Kyoto. We talked naturally about the fragile beauty of a maple leaf, about art, culture, and the philosophy of wabi-sabi, finding perfection in the imperfect. He had no idea I was an American billionaire. To him, I was just an American woman with a kindred spirit. Love arrived again, but this time it wasn't a raging, blinding fire. It was a calm, steady river that brought life back to my soul. He loved me for exactly who I was, scars, past, and all. When I eventually told him the truth about my life, he didn't judge me. Nor was he intimidated. He just took my hand and said, "You survived an incredible storm. I admire you and respect you deeply." By his side, for the first time in years, I didn't have to carry the armor of a ruthless CEO. I could just be me. He became my safe harbor. A year later, we got married in a small, incredibly intimate ceremony at an ancient temple in Kyoto. I cried, but this time, they were tears of pure joy and gratitude. Life proved to me that when a door violently slams shut, a much more beautiful one opens. After the hurricane, you don't just get the sun, you get the rainbow. The storm is long gone. The past was simply an expensive tuition paid to learn the true value of independence and self-worth. My present and my future belong to the wonderful man sleeping beside me, the meaningful projects I lead, and the unshakable inner peace I fought so hard to find. We have a beautiful little girl, a perfect blend of American and Japanese heritage. We named her Ava, hoping her life represents a bright, calm dawn, free from the dark nights I had to endure. I still run Vance Enterprises, but I've learned to balance the scales. My family is my absolute priority, my true sanctuary. Sometimes, while watching my daughter play in the beautiful garden Kenta designed for our home, and feeling his warm arms wrap around my waist from behind, I thank the universe even for the brutal storms of my past. Because without those days of endless, freezing rain, I never would have learned to truly appreciate the breathtaking beauty of a clear, sunny day like today. True happiness isn't a life completely devoid of storms. It's surviving them, finding yourself, and finally having a hand to hold and a safe place to call home. And I, Isabella, am blessed enough to have found exactly that. A full, complete, unshakable happiness. Dear listeners, this concludes another journey. A story full of raw emotion that took us from bitter resentment to the sweetest redemption. That moment when Isabella, after enduring such abuse, pulls out her phone and delivers a fatal corporate execution, surely made us all want to cheer. But beyond the revenge, what is the takeaway? This story forces us to reflect. When sharing this tale, the goal wasn't just the shock of a plot twist, but to deliver profound life lessons. The true value of a story lies in its power to illuminate and heal. The first lesson is about self-worth and the immense danger of losing yourself for the sake of love. Isabella's tragedy began the moment she made herself small to protect a fragile male ego, playing a role so well she was almost consumed by it. True love will never demand you shrink yourself. A real partner is never intimidated by your success, they brag about it. Don't look for someone who loves you for your submission, but for your brilliance and strength. The second lesson is never to judge a book by its cover. Jason's family was the epitome of all flash, no substance. They used luxury brands to mask their hollow, morally bankrupt interiors. True status isn't measured by a zip code, a Rolex, or a sports car. It's measured by character, intellect, and grace. We must learn to look past the superficial veneer. And of course, the ultimate lesson is the sheer power of emotional intelligence and silence. Faced with screaming insults, Isabella didn't yell back. She observed, gathered her resources, and struck with one calculated, fatal blow. In life, keeping your cool and executing a well-planned response is infinitely more powerful than engaging in a screaming match. Finally, the most vital takeaway is the true definition of happiness. After the dust settled, Isabella didn't find peace in vengeance or her bank account. She found it in giving back, living a purpose-driven life, and empowering others. Her joy was no longer tethered to anyone else's validation. The ultimate victory isn't seeing your enemies destroyed. It's finding absolute peace and joy after the storm passes. Isabella refused to let the bitterness rot her soul. She used her trauma to become a more compassionate, unstoppable force. That is true rebirth. Thank you for tuning in until the very end. Isabella's story has concluded, but her lessons remain. It's below. Every single perspective is valuable to our community. If this story resonated with you, don't continue sharing these incredible life stories together. Take care.